Hey yo, Reject Nation, I'm Greg Alba. How you doing?
And I'm John Humphrey.
Hey, we're gonna talk about Creed 2. I ain't really in this movie, but, Greg Alba's out. The joke don't make sense no more. Alright, here we go. Guys, we saw Creed 2 last night. Happy Thanksgiving to all. Glad you're here watching. You should be with your families, but you're alone, and I'm sorry. You know what I'm grateful for? Every single person that has downloaded and followed us on the Stardust app. You're the ones I'm really grateful for. You see, over there we do 30-second reaction reviews for films, TV shows, and trailers. A lot of them are micro sketches. Man, am I grateful to you guys. If you want me to be grateful to you, you know what to do. It's free to use, free to download. Do it now. Let's talk about Creed 2. Alright, so if you hear some collarbone jangling around, there's a dog I'm watching right now that's sitting right next to me at this very moment. So Creed 2 is about Adonis Creed having to verse the son of the man who killed his father in Rocky IV. Ivan Drago killed Apollo, and now he's fighting Victor Drago. This was a movie I'm very much looking forward to. I was a huge fan of the first Creed movie, and I'm a major Rocky fan. I don't think any of them were my favorite movie of all time. It's also the franchise I've actually seen more than any other franchise. I've seen so many. I've seen them so many times. So this film I actually thought was really damn good. I liked it a hell of a lot. I had a great time watching it. You did too?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, yeah.
There's a couple of things that I think right away that I noticed improvements on. First off, the first Creed is not really about Adonis versing anyone. There is an antagonist, sort of. It really is a sort of antagonist, just a guy he has to fight at the end. But this one, it really is Victor Drago versus Adonis Creed. But it's also more than that. But with that element, the way they handle the villains of Ivan and Victor, I was especially surprised by with how much intimacy you get with these guys, because you really get to understand their dynamics. You really get to understand their relationship. They're not just treated as, oh, they're bad Russians, like Rocky IV.
This is not just an exhibition fight. Look, this is us against them.
They're real people, and I really enjoyed their performances, and I was especially surprised with how you can get kind of a cheesy-ass villain like Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, catch up with him decades later, then you get a really good dramatic performance by Dolph Lundgren in this one.
Weirdly, that whole aspect of the movie and getting that little glimpse into the Dragos as humans kind of brought me back to Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
It kind of made me want to see a version of this where it's just like Rocky as a trainer and Drago as a trainer, and seeing them meet there, because Drago is a very different guy now than when you knew him in Rocky IV as well, and that's part of what makes this so compelling, is that time has truly passed and they have a personal story, even though it doesn't take up anywhere near the majority of the screen time. You know, it was a pleasant surprise, most definitely, and it makes the fight personal for
absolutely
both Creed and Rocky.
Because a lot of the themes of this film that are pretty in your face about it, but it works. You know, the sins of the father are passed down to the son. That is the theme of this whole film. And it works. It really plays to that strength. And another major improvement I thought it did is I liked Tessa Thompson and Michael B. Jordan in the first Creed. I wasn't in love with them as a couple or their chemistry, but in this movie, it does pick up some time after Creed. It's not like immediately after. Their history that's developed and the way their relationship is formed, and maybe just as them as performers as well, because, you know, Valkyrie and Killmonger. But having them in this movie, I really did fall in love with them as a couple. Almost instantaneously, you can feel their chemistry is just that much more dynamic.
They have a really lived-in relationship.
Yeah, it's great.
It's even little mannerisms and just those little familiarities that really help to sell it. You know?
Yeah, I love them together, and I really feel like a lot of the unique elements that come into play in terms of how their relationship is handled and plot points that occur within their family. That's stuff we haven't seen in any of the other Rocky movies or this whole franchise. I mean, to be honest, this is a very formulaic film. It's really predictable. For a fan of the franchise, that's not really an issue for me because most of them are predictable.
Well, at a certain point, it just comes down to, is he going to win or is he going to lose? You know? And will he go to the distance or not?
Like I've said it before, there's movies I hate that are so formulaic and offer nothing exciting. But then there's movies like the Rocky franchise, which are very formulaic. And this movie is formulaic, but it's executed very well. I think the performances are so damn good. Like Michael B. Jordan as Adonis is like just as electrifying as ever and so compelling. The first Creed movie feels like Adonis Adonis is the damn apostrophe. Adonis Creed's movie with Rocky being the main supporting character and having a supporting character storyline, but in this movie, it's very much more Adonis's movie. And Rocky's there. He's there to support Adonis. He's not as prevalent in this movie. That's not a bad thing, because this is slowly handing off the entire franchise to him.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of appropriate for this, and appropriate for the story too, because they hone in on the family element and the fact that Creed's family is basically Bianca, Rocky, and his mom, you know?
Yeah.
Having Rocky more towards the background also adds a narrative, foil, adds some weight, because, a lot of this movie is about Creed having to kind of find it within himself and kind of get to rock bottom on his own.
Rock!
Ha!
Come on, Rock! Come on, Rock! That is more of the role that Rocky's actually playing in this movie. Not the attitude of Mickey, but more the position Mickey plays.
Yeah. Giving some tough but sage advice.
Yeah. For these boxing movies, for this franchise, you really got to root for your main character as he goes on this journey. I do love Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Creed, but especially in this movie, I found myself exceptionally rooting for this guy to win the match. I think, in general, just because of the type of movie it is predictable, but I think especially if you're a fan of the franchise, is especially predictable. And I don't want to make that sound like it takes away from me enjoying it. There were parts that were a little bit of a detriment to that, because this film borrows heavily from not just Rocky IV, obviously. In a lot of ways, this feels like it could have been a direct sequel to Rocky IV.
Oh yeah, they're more robots now.
Yeah. It borrows a lot of plot beats, a lot of plot points from Rocky III especially, and it borrows a lot of how Apollo's attitude is in Rocky II.
This man is dangerous. This man is dangerous. I'm dangerous.
Plus the marriage angle and things like that.
Yeah, there's Rocky 2, 3, and 4. Rocky 2 is my favorite Rocky movie. I don't think it's the best one, but it's my personal favorite. Rocky 3 and 4 is when it gets exceptionally corny.
Everybody can change.
And really cheesy, and then completely falls apart by the time you get to Rocky 5.
Rocky 4 is my favorite, and I do think it's the best one.
So what was interesting about this was, even though this is more Creed's movie than Rocky's, and even though it's borrowing plot points, like the beats of Rocky 3 especially, which are very corny films, this is like the more dark, serious version of those movies.
Yeah, it's like if those movies somehow avoided being corny somehow.
Yeah.
It just still had the same plot points.
Because this movie is very dark. It's a much more serious film than any of the films in this franchise. Like, Creed's a pretty serious film. It still has a lot of charm. It still has a lot of that spirit. This movie, I feel like that might have been a bit of a missing element for me as a fan of just the franchise, is I missed some of that charm, because I didn't really laugh during this movie. Not that you're supposed to walk in this movie laughing. The upbeat heart spirit vibe that is not really in here throughout. It's a very dark film, and occasionally it's borderline melodramatic in terms of like soap opera territory. That's very minimal though. I think for the most part, majority of this, the drama really works. The darkness really works.
Yeah, it's more the volume of like serious life circumstances that he's facing over the course of this movie that kind of flirts with that. There are little moments of levity, but I almost feel like they're like buttons on the ends of certain scenes. So it's like you'll get a chuckle once every 20 minutes maybe, but yeah, it is a much darker movie, partly because it's so personal and the stakes are so much higher because there's always that looming element of death.
Yeah.
It's like if he fights this guy, is he gonna die? Because Donnie doesn't want to give up and is not going to want to throw in that towel, which is the whole big issue about the fight with his father in the first place.
And in terms of direction, because this is not Ryan Coogler returning, I think Stephen Caple Jr. did a pretty good job. And I think part of my experience was affected, is I don't want to harp on this too much, because I saw it at a theater where it was obvious that the projection was just not on par. Like, it was so apparent, like this is ridiculously dark, and I know this film doesn't look that dark. It's one of those experiences where you just know there's something wrong with the screen. And I think the fight scenes are really good in this movie. I think the boxing matches are great. If I were to take a step back and compare it, I don't think they're as well constructed as Ryan Coogler's direction. No, I'm not. I can't say that. Ryan Coogler had a much more confident hand and was better at dramatizing the story elements of the fights. If I don't really know how to phrase it. It's like there's something about the way the story of the fights unfolds in Creed 1 that I find a little bit more effective there than I do here. But if I don't compare it, even with comparison though, it's still great fight scenes. Like you still feel like these guys are really getting hit. Like it's still really intense.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the fights are still really thrilling, and they're really well captured. I will meet you there though and say that the first movie I never really fell out of it, whereas at times during this one I would catch myself going, oh yeah, this is a bit familiar or whatever. So it wasn't quite as consistent to the point where I just never got pulled out of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, and I think it's not only on Stephen Caple Jr. I think it's also on the fact that, like Stallone did come back to write this one. I appreciate him not, making himself front and center for this movie, even though I think he's like the co-writer. But then I'm like, oh, it also makes sense why this feels more like the Rocky sequels than Creed felt like a Rocky sequel,
Yeah, totally.
That's what I mean by sometimes the melodramatic elements can feel a little bit soap opera-y because sometimes Stallone gets a little bit preachy and a little bit on the nose with how he handles certain scenes. But that's very minimal. I think most of this is really effective, really good. Even though it's formulaic, I still had a great time, and I still think a lot of the emotional beats really hit home, and there's improvements on the villainy and also on the dynamics between Tessa Thompson and Michael B. Jordan, which is very crucial to the story working. While there's some stuff that's missing in terms of Ryan Coogler's direction, I still think there's actually improvements from the first one. You kind of get a little bit of both.
It's a great first impression for Stephen Caple Jr. for sure, and any complaints I have ultimately amount to things that are familiar in the script that make it a little less enchanting of a story, because this isn't as new to us now. The whole Drago rematch could have been so silly, and I thought they handled that really well.
Yeah.
And for all the things this movie has to do, arguably that's the most important one, and that's the most cathartic and engaging part of the movie. Like, I actually wanted more with the Dragos, honestly.
Yeah, it's crazy how there's 3 movies in a row of this franchise where every time I hear what they're doing, I'm like, how can this work? Like Rocky Balboa, he's so old. And it's great. Creed, what? You're making a supporting character? What do I care about Apollo Creed's son? Wow, so good. And then this one too, you're like, that sounds so stupid and cheesy. And then you watch, you're like, wow, this really works, Yeah, every time it's a nice surprise at how well they still pull these movies off. I really do recommend it, and I had a great time watching it. Anyway, guys, did you see Creed 2? Did you like it? Do you prefer it over the first one? Where do you think this movie can go? Is there room for more sequels? What's your favorite Rocky movie? Choose one of the questions. Subscribe to The Real Rejects, click that notification bell, and download and follow us on the Stardust app today, people. Happy Thanksgiving!